So a quick lesson to review rounding. I know it's something that you've worked a lot on in elementary school, but it's going to be really important in these next couple units. So we want to do a quick refresher. So make sure you get your title up top. Our essential question is, what does it mean to round a decimal? And then when you're ready, hit play. So we're going to do a very quick little review of our place value, just because some of us are a little rusty about which numbers go where. So if you remember, the first place to the left of the decimal is the ones place. And then we have our tens and our hundreds. Those are the ones we're most comfortable with. And we have thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, all that kind of stuff going up. On the decimal side, the trick is, remember that there is no, there's no such thing as a once place. The first decimal is called the tenths place. Then we have the hundredths. And then we have the thousandths place. Some of us will remember that. Some of us, it's coming back to us now. Some of us will still have some trouble with it. But it's important to know those different place values so that way when you're rounding something, you know which place value you are focusing on. So rounding a number really means asking, what am I closer to? So when you're rounding off a number, you're trying to find what number with fewer decimal places is it closest to. So we're going to use this one as an example. We want to round 8.6 to the nearest whole number. So that means rounding to the ones place. A number line can help us visualize it because it's really kind of figuring out what is it in between. Well, 8.6, it's above an 8, but it's below a 9. It's in between an 8 and a 9. It's 8 point and a little bit more. So on a number line, we could put an 8 here and a 9 here, and then we could number our number line. So in the middle, we'd have 8.5. Here we'd have 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 8.4. Over here we'd have 8.6, 8.7, 8.8, and 8.9. So when we say we're rounding to the nearest whole number, what we're really saying is 8.6 is right here. Is it closer to round up to the 9, or is it closer to go back down to the 8? So when we're rounding, we're going to which one is closest. Well, if we look at our number line, we can see that it only takes 1, 2, 3, 4 steps to get up to a 9, whereas it would take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps to get back to an 8. So in this case, it would round up to a 9 because it's closer to a 9. That's what we're doing when we're rounding, is trying to figure out which of them is it closest to. So let's try a couple more together. So again, I'm going to make you draw it out on a number line because it helps us in visualizing it. But we want to round 0.72, so 72 hundredths to the nearest tenths. Well, again, a good place to start is, what are my options? Well, if I'm dealing with the tenths, I'm already at 7 tenths, so I could stay at 7 or I could go up to 8. Well, I'm really in between 0.70 and 0.80. We want to know where is 0.72 closest. Well, here I've got 0.70. Here I have 0.80, because remember it's always easiest to compare decimals together if they're the same length. So in between would be 0.75. Here's 0.71, 0.72, 0.73, 0.74. And yes, it's kind of a pain to write all these out, but it really forces you to think about where do those numbers fall on the number line? What are the different decimals that are there to help with my place value? But we just number our number line all the way from 7 up to 8, so 0.7 up to 0.8, and then we look at where am I closest? Well, 0.72. 0.72 is closer to the 0.7 than it is up to the 0.8, so we would say this one would round to 0.7 or 0.70. And when you round, everything after the digit you're rounding to turns to zeros. So let's see another one. 1.687 rounded to the nearest hundredths place. Remember, that's your second decimal place. Well, remember, that means I can round down to the 8 or up to the 9, but everything in front of it stays the same. And I can add in that extra 0 just to help me with lining everything up. On a number line, this can be a little more complicated, but here's my 1.680, and then my 1.681, 1.682, 1.683, 1.684, 1.685, 1.686, and hopefully you're kind of picturing where 1.687 is going to fall. Notice how far we already had to go from the 1.680, and I have 1.688, 1.689, and then lastly 1.690. I can see pretty easily that my 1.687 is closest to rounding up to my 1.69. So this one would round up to my 1.690 instead of my 1.680. So I like to think of it as 87 is closer to the 90 than it is back down to the 80. So now that we've kind of seen some examples on a number line, hopefully we understand a little better why it works that way. Let's get our rules written down. So here's the steps that I like to go through. First, I like to underline the place value I'm rounding to. So if I'm rounding to the hundredths place, I underline the digit in the hundreds place. Then decide which two values are you rounding in between. That's kind of our high and our low. Next, look at the number to the right. It decides whether you're going to round up or stay the same. If that next number is a 4 or less, it means you're going to round back down. You're going to come back down and stay the same. If you're 5 or more, so think of your number line, you're past the halfway point, you're going to round up to the next number. So basically, if your number is at least halfway to that next one, we're going to round it up. And then everything after the underlined digit turns to zeros. So take a minute, get that written down, and then hit play, and we're going to practice a handful of them together. All right, so let's go through our rules, or our steps. We're going to round to the hundredths place. So I find my hundredths place and I underline it. Decide what am I in between. Well, I could go down and stay at a 7, or I could go up to a 8. So I like to think of it as a 76 is in between a 70 and an 80. Well, 6 is past halfway. It's 5 or higher, so it's going to round up. So I'm going to round up to 4.58 instead of 4.57. And then you can add in that extra 0 if it helps you. Next one, rounding to the tenths. So I'm looking at my 0, and I look at the number right after it. My 0, well, I could either stay at a 0 or I could round up to a 1. So I look at my 4. 4 or less says I'm going to round down. I'm going to come back down to my 0 and end up at 9.0. 4 wasn't far enough along, so I come back to the 0. Nearest whole number. That's code for my ones place. So I could either stay a 0 or I could round up to a 1. So in this case it'd be to a 10 or up to an 11. So I look at my 8. Remember, we don't care anything about these extra digits over here. We just care about that very next one because that kind of tells us where we fall on our number line. An 8 is over halfway. That means I'm going to round up to my 11.0. So instead of 10.8, I'm going to round up to my 11. Here, to the nearest tenths. Underlining the tenths place. So I'm in between a 5 and going up to a 6. My next number is a 5. Remember, 5 or more, we're at least halfway along that number line or farther, so that means we're going to round up. So I would round up to 814.6 instead of down to 814.5. Remember, everything after the underlined number turns to zeros. Everything in front of it stays right the way it was. Next, the thousandths place. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths is my third decimal place. So it's either going to stay a 6 or round up to a 7. Everything in front of it's going to stay the same either way. A 2, well, that's 4 or less, so that means we're going to come back down. We're going to stay at 0.636. That 2 isn't far enough away, it's going to round back down to the 6. Last one, hundredths, tenths, hundredths. And this one's a little tricky, I threw it in here for us. You can either stay at the 9 or round up to a 10. So there we carried over to that next decimal place. So we're really rounding in between 7.09 or 7.10 or 7.1. We look at the number after the underlined one is a 9. 9 says round up. So I'm going to round up to the 7.10 instead of down to the 7.09. So focus on your digit that you're rounding to, and it's the very next number that makes your decision.